Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Hadrian's Wall. This is a chunky roll and write released by Renegade Games. Alright, so I'm going to give a very quick overview of Hadrian's Wall. The main thing I want to tell you is that it's a lot less scary than it looks. The bark is a lot worse than its bite. Basically what's going to happen is that over the course of 6 rounds, so you've got 6 little year markers up here, you are going to do everything that you possibly can with the resources, human and stone, that you generate. And basically what will happen is that every round you're going to flip one of these cards to figure out what resources you're going to have. You're going to draw cards from your deck in order to choose a scoring condition and some additional resources, as well as shapes for scouting. So you're going to use your cards to kind of direct your game and your strategy, and then also take some extra resources. And in the solo game, there's also a neutral deck that you draw cards from to let you interact with it as if it was another player. Basically, there are situations in the game where you're allowed to trade with your neighbors or use your neighbors' scouting shapes on their cards in order to do what you need to do on your paper. So if you want to see all that in action, I'm actually going to have a how to play video out shortly. But the main thing to know is that there's a 6-year structure and that you're using these cards to help determine the resources you have to work with. Then you're going to deploy those resources in order to do a number of activities that are on these 2 sheets. Basically over here you have wall and resource type stuff going on. So basically you can do mining, build up your wall guard, build up parts of your wall, build up your fort, and add granaries that allow you to extend how far you're actually able to build your fort. Because everything is kind of gated based on how far you've taken the foundation of your fort so that you can then build protections onto the top of it. And essentially in order to do anything in the game, you pay the resource that's listed. And then when you check off certain boxes, you check the resources that are in the box and then take them immediately. So you're essentially taking these turns where you spend one kind of resource and then you're hopefully chaining to keep gaining things and gaining things and gaining things until you're having these massive turns, especially in the later years of the game. As you work on your wall, there are also some opportunities to boost your resource production, get extra citizens, get extra builders, and even build roads that give you points. So if you invest in these sorts of things early, then you're going to get dividends throughout the game in the form of extra resources or even extra points in order to make progress in the game. Down here is where your main point scoring tracks are, so you can kind of get a sense of how you're doing. But basically, there are 4 different point types, plus a calculation for the points that come off of your cards. And you're aiming to do as well as possible. Peak solo score is 70, and then we can talk about what happens once you can hit that consistently. There's also a negative scoring condition, which is disdain. Basically, every year, the Picts will try to come and invade, and if you didn't protect against them, then you're going to get into trouble. But I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Over here, you have places to put your civilians. So basically, you can invest with traders, performers, priests, apparitores, or patricians, and this opens up extra buildings and actions that are useful throughout the game. So the traders let you build precincts for resource production and points. You can trade goods, and that'll get you points. Down here in the theater, you can put on performances or mess around with gladiators. Priests allow you to build gardens and temples that give you something to do with your meeples and also generate points, and as well as advancements along these tracks. The apparitores let you build baths, which let you bribe your way out of some disdain, which you might need depending on how you do, and a courthouse that lets you basically kind of exchange one type of resource for another. And then down here with the patricians, you can take the diplomat action in order to get some points and also block against the Picts. And then over here is scouting, where you can basically use these Tetris-like shapes on the cards to fill out this little grid here and pick up some extra resources. And one thing that you should note as you play, and something that'll be very clear in my how-to video, is that as you move along these tracks, there are different colored flags. And basically what that means is that you've unlocked the ability to build certain things. So for example, you can't build a small precinct until you're 3 spots on the way along this track. And there are other kinds of limitations. You can't just do everything all at once. So part of the game is deciding where to invest and how soon in order to open up the way to make progress later. And then once you've spent all of your resources and done all of your little chain reactions, at the end of the year, you're going to go up against the Picts. So one thing that you can choose to invest in if you are crossing out these shield symbols are your cohorts. So you have left, right, and central. And basically, you're going to draw a certain number of cards depending on the year and difficulty level you've chosen. And they're going to show you what direction the picks are coming from. So if you draw 4 cards, you draw 4 of these, and then you see how many of the attacks you successfully managed to block. If you block them all, then you get a certain number of valor points based on the gray flag over here. If you fail to block them all, you're going to pick up some disdain, which you circle off down here, and which can lead to some negative points that are pretty nasty if you let it get out of control. So even though it looks like there's a whole lot going on, this game is kind of like a giant slot machine of working on your wall, working on your buildings, trying to get points, and then trying to build things that will keep that chain running longer and longer every year, every turn. And again, I'm going to post a how to solo video for this so you'll be able to actually see the game in action as I play. But for now, let's have some final thoughts. All right, so now for some final thoughts. Overall, I'm going to say I really, really, really like Hadrian's Wall. I absolutely love games where you're trying to squeeze the most possible out of every turn and, get every advantage, every point, every extra resource. And, playing Hadrian's Wall is kind of like a pinball machine where you fill in one slot and then it gets you something in another part of the sheet and it gets you another resource and then you can use that to build something else and then that building gives you a point and then getting enough points gets you another worker. And so basically all of that together creates this really satisfying experience for me that I personally just really enjoy. The game looks a lot heavier than it actually is. It had like a 3-point-something weight on BGG when I looked earlier today, and I was honestly surprised by that. It looks heavy, but I would say that in reality, it just isn't. It's actually a very manageable game with some caveats that I am about to give you. That said, this game actually may be better solo than multiplayer. It's very, very non-interactive. There's like interaction where you look at your neighbor's cards, and it's actually a little bit spicier in solo because you have to draw extra picked cards to make up for using those neighbor cards. But you're not really going to interact much with each other's play space in a game of Hadrian's Wall. And because you want to sit there and think through your entire turn, this actually may be a game that's better to play by yourself because then you don't have to wait for other people or kind of panic because other people are waiting for you. You can take your sweet time and your game can evolve as it is meant to. Also, because it was so non-interactive, we were just sitting there coloring on our little pieces of paper. Somebody in my game group walked by who'd been playing another game and looked at us for a second and said, "Y'all, it looks like you're taking the SAT." Which, I mean, I was the kind of student kind of like the SAT. So no, I will say it's a really satisfying game, but it requires a lot of concentration. You have to sit there and really look at the sheets and enjoy doing that kind of accounting in order for the game to be satisfying. That said, it really did it for me. It gets my engine going. I was very happy with it. The other thing that I will say about this game is that it is very difficult for the mistake prone. I make mistakes and it's really easy to miss stuff on here. It's very easy to try to build a building that, you actually didn't advance the civilian track enough to create or open up yet. It's very easy to accidentally go beyond the lines in your fort area because you didn't advance your granary far enough and you just kind of missed it because you were working on the mines in the forests. There are just a lot of little easy accounting errors to make because there's so much going on. And you have to be really, really on top of this game and really focusing on it. And even then, you're still going to mess up. So that's okay, as long as it's okay with you. But if you get crazy when you make mistakes, or, you really struggle with an asterisk next to your score because you made a mistake that you couldn't take back, then this game may frustrate you quite a bit. I did notice too, in a multiplayer game, because even if your teach is pretty good and other people seem to know how to play, if you have new players who are extra mistake prone, because you're all taking your turn simultaneously and you're so focused on your own work, then it's really easy to miss mistakes that others are making as well, which can throw off a multiplayer game. It's less the case in solo. I mean, in the times that I mess up, what I will typically do is I'll essentially just pay myself back. I'll treat it like a loan and maybe pay it back with interest. So forego, the workers or resources I would have needed and sacrifice one more. But I mean, everybody will come up with their own solutions for this. But overall, I mean, I would say that Hadrian's Wall is, maybe it's my favorite roll and write or flip and fill right now. I really, really like it. And it has its challenges, but for me, this is really the ideal in the sense that you're kind of bouncing all over the place and really, really pushing yourself to do better and better and better. In ways, this game gives me some of the same feelings as Fleet Dice, which is another roll and write that I truly adore, but I like it better. So even though it's chunky and it doesn't quite fulfill like the simple pull it out, play it premise of most roll and write or flip and fill games, this one really does it for me because I find the puzzle of doing it so satisfying, and I like having different options for things to pursue. I like kind of letting my my cards from my deck guide me on that as I'm choosing scoring conditions, and overall that's really nice. And now that I'm starting to score a little bit higher, I now will actually be able to do the solo campaign. So in the rule book, there's just solo scores. Like if you score between this and this, you're a melee, you're just a soldier, or like, oh, you can be the prefectus, you're the best. And that's cool. And, for a while, I've been kind of in that 60 scoring range, trying to get to where I can consistently hit 70. I think I may be about to make another breakthrough with it, and in which case I'll be ready to start the campaign. So there's also a solo campaign for this game that I'll link in the show notes, where you're basically going through forts, and you have different restrictions on your play and different challenges as you go from fort to fort. So this game also, once you get to where you consistently score high, it gives you a little bit more to do with it after that. So it just pretty much keeps giving. I've considered it quite worth my time. I really like it. And my overall review of it as a game is very positive. I actually want to make a video that's a follow-up for historicity purposes in the future, so be on the lookout for that. But the one thing I do want to talk about is the presence of the purple meeples, which are called servants. The rulebook is honest about the fact that they are slaves early on in the rulebook, but then you just keep calling them servants throughout, and I kind of feel like, are we really going to just be like, yeah, they were there and we acknowledge their suffering, and then continue to ignore it while having a really good time the rest of the game? That was something that really gave me a hard time. If you watch my playthrough video, you'll notice that I can't decide what to call the purple meeples because I don't allow my students in my Latin classes to call a servus, which is the word for a slave, a servant. I think it's really important to acknowledge fully historically what you are doing. And I do feel just uneasy that I'm playing a game that has slaves in it that I'm acquiring and then using for various purposes. That obviously has not stopped me from enjoying the game. Played the game many times. I don't intend to stop, but it does give me just that little ick factor, and it gives it to me every time because I think that when you take a game's theme seriously, you owe it to the historical setting and to yourself to be real about what it is that you're doing. And, that constant kind of cold reminder of how gross Roman society really was, is present for me when I play this. And, there will be people who are like, whatever, it's just colored meeples and it's fine and whatever. But that's not how I feel. And if that's not how you feel either, then you should be warned that that is probably my biggest barrier to playing this game, actually. I feel really awkward because I don't feel comfortable calling a slave a servant. And I feel very uncomfortable saying, oh, you got another slave meeple, because that doesn't feel great either. So, what you do about that historically, there's a lot of ways that we could approach that, I guess. I might talk about that in another video. But that's my biggest issue with the game. As a game, I think it's delightful. Very easy to make mistakes, lots of accounting, but super satisfying, and I don't see this one leaving my collection anytime soon. So that's Hadrian's Wall. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. Please do support me on Patreon if you're feeling generous. And most of all, happy gaming.